Hello, my name is Keyack, and in this video today, we're going to give you a brief demonstration or training just on an overview of the process of importing a model from MBS through SlideRule into Tekla Structures, running numbering, which will assign the piece marks and quantities for the job, quickly making a couple rafter drawings, and then moving on to making some erection drawings. And so really it's for a beginner in training and just basically giving you an overview of the process. Now, what I'm going to first do is I'm actually going to go into my MBS folder here. So on my C drive, MBS util folder, I'm going to go down here to the very bottom where there's this SlideRule INI file. And this INI file controls some of the different settings that SlideRule uses when importing into Tekla Structures. Now, I'm just getting started out here, and so I'm not ready to import in trim and sheeting at this time. I'm just going to be detailing the mainframe in cold form. So what I'll do here is there's this hide panels and hide trim, and I can set it equal to true. And this is underneath the debug category. And so I'll set that, and then I'll just simply hit save here. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I don't import any sheeting or trim at this time for detailing. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into MBS, and I want to make sure that my job here underneath auto, that the design and the detail has been created. You don't necessarily need to create drawings, but definitely design and detail needs to be made on your job. And then what you'll want to do is you'll just go in here to utilities, and you will choose the run slide rule option. This will then go through and it'll first import all of the profiles for your cold form. If you were actually doing sheeting and trim, DT profile will be red and it'll bring in all of those profiles into Tekla Structures. So that way it can create all of the modeling parts that you have in your metal building here inside of Tekla Structures. Then it exports the parts, then it does your bolts, holes, and welds, and creates the assemblies here in the model. All right, so when everything's done, you're going to see potentially an error message or just a logger file. If you open that up, you'll actually be able to read in here and see what some of these are. The usual culprit behind these are sheeting and trim type issues, or you might have certain profile things that you might need to investigate, but we're just going to go ahead and move on through that right now. So I'm all done with MBS, and then when I zoom in here, you're going to see that there's welds on all the parts. We can see that our holes, bolts, basically all of the stiffeners, all the connections here from MBS have been imported into Tekla Structures. This also includes essentially all of our cold form connections and our standard clips that we might be using. So if I actually click on, for instance, this clip here, we can see that this is an AL1 clip that is defined in our DT clip file. So this is a standard clip mark. And you'll see also here that up on our purlin clip, we can see that this is a PGC and 8. And so the -8 basically signifies in Tekla here, any negative start number signifies that this is a standard part in the model. And Tekla will force that piece mark. Now, essentially here I've gone through and I've actually done a pretty good job in MBS setup. So we're not going to talk about anything related to setup. We're assuming that we've done a really good job setting up the SlideRule INI, setting up our detailed connection references and database in MBS so that we can get the best transfer into Tekla Structures possible. Now, one thing I will say though, as a production detailer, your job is to methodically go through the building and look at all of the assemblies and just quickly look at all the connections and make sure that there's no mismatches on holes, there's no clashes or anything interfering here, and you want to methodically go through the building. I'm not going to train this today, but there is actually a way to actually status and tag pieces in the model and colorize them so that way you can keep track of what you've actually reviewed and make sure that everything looks good so that way there's no clashes or any misfit ups and things like that that may impact fabrication and erection in the field. Now, one other thing here is that I can go down to my bottom toolbar and choose the Select Assemblies option. When I choose this option here, you can see that I can highlight the assemblies and you can see what's actually shop assembled together. For instance, here's my rafters, and then I can see my columns here. And then I can also go through and I can look at essentially my cold form as well. Ooh, this looks a little bit tight, so this is something I might take a look at a review here and see if that will actually work. But this is the kind of thing that you'll do. You'll review everything. You'll look for any potential clashes. You'll see how things have imported. Here, for instance, I've got a small issue that I can see where these bolts are interfering with this stiffener. So what I might do is if, depending on whatever is going to impact design the least, I may check with the engineer, but I can just grab these bolts, right click, say move special linear, and then maybe I'll just drop this down, or actually move that up, say 4 inches, move. Okay, so that's a little bit too high, so let's do -2, move, and that looks like nice and centered there. So these are kind of some of the small fixes and things that you might have to do after you import in from MBS through SlideRule into Tekla Structures. Okay, so we've imported the model, we've gone through and done a thorough review and fixed any things that we need to do in Tekla Structures after import. The next step is to come up here to the Drawings and Reports tab at the top of Tekla Structures, and what we're going to do is do this Perform Numbering option here. So underneath this menu there is a Number Modified Objects. When I choose this, Tekla is going to look at all of the newly created parts and assemblies in the model. It's going to compare the geometry, and it's going to automatically compare things and identify and assign piece marks, as well as create the quantities. Now, if I go in and I just select, for instance, here on this web, I right-click on this using my mouse and say Inquire Part. This will tell me that this is WB3, so Web 3, on this particular assembly here, RF2-2. So this is the part mark here, and then this is the assembly mark that's on. Now, if I want to actually see what assembly this is on, I can select on this web and right-click and choose Inquire Assembly. This then shows me that this orange part is the main part of the assembly, and that's actually going to be the part that defines how the assembly drawing is created and drawn. And we can see that somebody has set this job up in MBS to actually draw the rafters from top down, so from peak down to knee. And you can also switch it to be from basically the knee up towards the peak. But here you'll see all of the parts, and again, Tekla is automatically identifying and assigning the piece marks. It will pull in your prefixes from MBS, but Tekla is going to look at the geometry and calculate it. So you may not get exactly the same piece marks from MBS that it assigned, but you're going to get pretty similar prefixes and numbering style. But again, if you've changed or modified anything in Tekla, you want Tekla to do the piece marking and the numbering process and assign quantities and piece marks. Okay, so once we've got that set, the next step is that we're going to go ahead and create some shop drawings. All right, to get started with that, we'll actually come up here to the master drawing catalog. This is one of the easiest ways for us to quickly do that. And then if I actually come down here to my selection filter down at the bottom, I can do a search here for a selection filter that is just basically going to be the rigid frame. So if I scroll down here and do, for instance, MBS rigid frame, and then I window around my model, that's going to only highlight, for instance, the rigid frame steel here. And then I can do end wall steel afterwards if I'd like. But I'm going to come back to this master drawing catalog, and if we'd like to keep this on top, we can actually pin this here so that way that doesn't go away and stays on top when we click in Tekla. But what I want to do is I want to choose this MBS assembly drawings rule set here, and then if I'm going to create the drawings based on the selected parts in the model, I choose this create drawings. If I actually want to create the shop drawings for everything, including the end walls, even girts, purlins, jams, and headers, braces, if I want everything to be created, then I can choose this option here. But if I want it based on selection, I will just choose this first option here. So I have the rule selected, the part selected, and now it's going to go through that selection, and it's going to create assembly drawings or shop drawings in Tekla. Now, once everything is done, we can close the master drawing catalog, and then at the lower left-hand corner, it says 14 drawings have been created successfully. If I go to Drawings and Reports here at the top of Tekla, we'll then go to the Document Manager, and this is essentially where I access all of the drawings here on my project. And you can see that this is only just rigid frame. So I've got one drawing here for an RF assembly, so rigid frame assembly, and then I've got a second drawing, which is actually the web drawing for this 3-plate assembly. Let's just open up RF1-1, and we'll take a look at this. Now, when I look inside of here, you can see that I have actually turned on the weld table here, and I've got basically this layout here. If I double click on the background of the drawing, I'm actually using an 11x17 sheet, and I'm using the weld table option. You can also choose the option here without weld table if you prefer to show the welds directly on the drawing. But then I have the full bill of material. I have all my gauge material. You can see my webs, all my piece marks, my quantities, my lengths, and my weights. You can also see the colors or the finishes coming across from MBS, and then the material grade mapping, and then we can set the job number and title block here at the lower right hand corner. Now, as far as dimensioning goes, you may need to clean things up, but this actually looks pretty good actually. You may need to move some things out of the way. So for instance, here I've got like this stiffener that needs to move, and so I can just kind of hold down shift and drag that away and move it over. Here I've got this that needs to move. Maybe my hole gauges can come over here. I've got my assembly overall, and I can just kind of drag that up here. And then if you click on the gray border, you can actually manually move that, or you can click on the background of the drawing and say Arrange Drawing Views, and it will then try to auto scale and fit that in there. Now I'm going to undo that because I actually liked how it was stretched out a little bit, so I'll just move that around. I can decrease these dimensions. I can move that running dimension up. And so you pretty much have full control of just dragging and dropping and kind of manipulating and moving things around so that way they're cleaned up. All right, so essentially you would add any additional dimensions as required, do a little bit of cleanup, and then you'll close this drawing, and then you'll basically repeat this process for each drawing in the drawing list. Now, my suggestion is that as you go through each drawing and you've cleaned them up, you should come up here to the upper right-hand corner and mark the drawing ready for issuing. That way, when you're doing a whole bunch of drawings, you can actually keep track of what you reviewed, what's cleaned up, and what you're ready to print out and make ready for checking. Now, I'm going to go to the next drawing here, which is a web drawing. And inside of here, the steps here is you're going to see some very basic dimensions as a starting point to work with, and you may need to add additional dimensions as required. Now what I can do is I can actually select on both these webs, right click, and say create single part views. Now this is going to create some additional views here, and what you may need to do is click on the inside border of this gray, see how there's two borders here? You'll click on the inside one and you may need to change the scale here. Maybe we'll just change this to 32 and I'll just say modify, and then that will scale that down so that way that'll fit on the drawing. Now I may do the same thing here. I'll just double click on that view. I'll change this to 32, modify, and then that scale changes. Now you'll see that the views are kind of not in place. So rather than manually moving them, if I just click on the background, right click and say Arrange Drawing Views, now we have a nice basically oriented and cleaned up web drawing here where we can see the individual plates, so that way the shop can use those for checking and nesting purposes, and then we can see how those are actually welded together. All right, so we'll close this down, and there's again a checkbox marked drawing ready for issuing. When you use that and then go back up here to Tekla at the upper left hand corner, open your document manager, you'll see that that checkbox has been checked as you progress through your drawings. Now, one other thing that I'll want to do is once all of my drawings have been reviewed, I can hold down Shift and select all my drawings, or I can right click and say select all drawings here. So there's a Control A or select all. And if I've got all my drawings cleaned up, we can go ahead and mark them as ready for issuing. And then we can come down here to the revision option at the lower left hand corner. Now I'll start up by loading up for fabrication, or if these are going for approval, I'll put in my initials and then basically who the checker was. We can put in today's date by just selecting in this, and now we'll go ahead and say create. That'll then add a revision 0 to the revision column, and then if we actually go inside of that drawing, so we're now inside of the drawing editor here, and we can see at the lower right that there is a 0 and 4 fabrication that has been set up. Now, one thing I haven't set here is the job number and basically the project name, and I should have actually done that at the very beginning. So I'll just quickly go back to that. So I close out of the drawing, so I'm here back in the model. I'll go up to the Tekla menu at the upper left-hand corner. We will go to Project Properties, which is about halfway down. And then when I go inside of there, I'll put in my job number. So I'll just put in 9999, for example, and then I'll just say this is a training model. And when you modify basically these project attributes or properties, these will be automatically linked to all your drawing title blocks, and then that will fill in. And if you have additional information such as the customer or additional data or the project address, and you show those in your title blocks, then you can map those and show that information as well. Now I'm going to press the modify button here, and then that will make the yellow fields go away. Whenever you see the yellow fields, that's basically telling you that those fields have not been modified or set to the model yet. So we've set modify there, and then I'll clear out of that by just clicking away, and I will come up here to the upper left hand corner and I will save my model. And so now we have our basically our shop drawings set. We've got the revision set. Let's go back to the document manager though. And one other thing is I want to actually put the drawn by and maybe the checked by information here on these drawings. So again, I'll right click and say select all, and that'll highlight all my drawings. Then what I can do is I can right click here, and there's this user defined attributes option at the top of the right click menu. When I go to that and I go to the workflow tab, I'm going to uncheck all my checkboxes so that way I don't accidentally modify other user defined attributes other than the ones that I want to use here. So I'm going to put in my initials, and then I'll put in the checked by, so we'll do same guy, and then we can even put the drawing check date here. And as you fill in these different attributes, the checkboxes are going to be set here. And that basically means that only the things that are checked when I modify all of these drawings, only these 3 checked attributes are going to be set. Anything else will be ignored that is unchecked. So I'll modify that there and I'll press cancel. And so now if I just open up a drawing here and we look at the lower right hand corner, we have our revision, we have my initials for drawn by, the date drawn, and then we have the training model, which is the project property for the project name, and then we have the job number 999. And then the piece mark is essentially, or the drawing number is essentially the piece mark of this assembly. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and close that down. And now we have all of our shop drawings created. And just to show the basics of printing to PDFs, we can select all these drawings. And then what we can do is we can right click and we can choose the print option. So if I come down here about 4 or 5 items down, you'll see print and we'll press that. Now what we can do is we can actually come up to the top and let's just choose, for instance, 11 by 17 print. That'll change basically some of the fields here, or you can use standard. You can see that it's automatically choosing the paper size. Maybe I want black and white. And if I want to see a preview of the drawings, I just click in the middle here and it'll show you those drawings. Now I'm using a partner license, so you're going to see this like kind of watermark on here. You won't see that on your drawings using a production license. But essentially you can see that there's a nice clean 11 by 17 drawing. You can come up here to the upper right hand corner and press the next button and you can see all of the sheets and kind of get a preview. And once you're all set, I usually recommend to come over here to the left and choose this open folder when finished, and that'll open up the folder where all the PDFs are created. Now there's another option here to create a PDF binder. If you choose this output to single file, you can create a PDF binder if you'd like to and have all the PDFs in one single PDF file or all the drawings in one file. I'm going to go ahead and create individual files, so I'll just leave that unchecked and then I'll have this option to open the folder. I'll come down to the lower left hand corner and then I'll press the print button. When I do that, it's going to go through each one of those sheets and it will print those out and make the PDFs. And then here you go. It shows the folder is opened, and this is a plot files folder that's inside of your Tekla Structures model folder. And here we can see this is the model folder. And then you have these individual PDFs that you can then package together and release for fabrication. Now, if I wanted to create CNC files for this model, what I would do is I would go back to the document manager. I would go to assembly drawings here in this category at the left. And these are all the shop drawings that I just made, which are type A or assembly drawings. Again, I'm going to hold down shift and select all the drawings, or I can select one drawing, right click and say select all. And then there is this cube at the top, this icon that says select objects in the model for the selected drawings. When I do that, it will highlight all of the pieces in the model that are associated to these drawings. And this is a great way to control what type of objects are selected in the model for creating reports or exporting essentially your CNC information. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the Tekla menu at the upper left-hand corner. I'll go to Export, and there's this NC Files option. When I choose this here, you're going to see that I can choose these different CNC rules with these checkboxes, and it will organize the exports for angles, plates, and profiles and create the NC1 or DSTV files for each of these different types of objects and put them in their own respective folders. All I need to do is come down here to the lower left and choose the Select Parts option, press Create, and then here at the lower left-hand corner, Tekla says NC files have been written for all of the parts. Now, once that's done, I'll close this, and then I'll go up to the Tekla menu. I'll go to Open Model Folder, and then inside of the model folder itself, there's this NC file subfolder. And here, if I would have had any like profiles or angles, they would have shown. Since I didn't have any wide flange or anything selected, I just had 3-plate. You'll see here that underneath the plates section that there are individual CNC files based on the piece mark for all of those parts. This can then be used like a nesting software for your plasma or your plate table. And if we had any like beam files for our hot rolled steel, such as wide flange steel, or if we had any angles, those could be fed through your Angle Master CNC machine in your shop. Or if you have like a beam line, like a petting house, a feature machine, controlled automation, etc., you can actually feed those NC1 files to drill holes, do copes, and cutting and scribing information for the shop. So there you go. That shows you the basics of exporting your DSTV or your CNC files. Next, what we can do is we can come over here to the Applications and Components panel at the right-hand side of Tekla, and we'll actually go to the MBS Tools group or category by pressing this button, and we're going to find this DSTV to DXF converter. When we go ahead and click on this, what it'll do is it'll open up a dialog box for us, and we're all done with the document manager, so I'll just close that down. And essentially, it'll read from your firm folder a DSTV to DXF converter that I've already set up. And what you'll need to do is usually in setup and training, we kind of go through all these settings that the shop prefers for certain layers for converting CNC files to DXF files for the plate nesting software. So if your software can't read DSTV files directly, and you need DXF files, then you can basically go through each of these settings and go through this. Now, there's a great help file on Tekla Online that actually covers how to set up all your layers and how all of this works. So you can go through that, and again, I usually go through this when I set things up with clients. Now, what you'll want to do is you'll come in here and you're going to go ahead and add the files that you just exported. So we'll browse inside the model folder. We'll go to NC files. We're going to only find the plate files here. I will scroll down, hold down Shift on my keyboard so I can select all those files. I'll press open, and they're now added to the list. I then simply come down here to the lower left-hand corner and press convert, and then all of those CNC files are converted from NC1 or DSTV to DXF files. So I'll click the open output folder here. That then opens up the DXF folder that's now inside of my model folder here inside the NC files. You'll see the individual DXF files. And then if I want to go back to the original CNC files or DSTV files, those are here. So these are DSTV, the NC ones, and then these are DXFs that were created from that using the converter. So there you go. That shows you how to export your CNC information. Next, let's go ahead and go to reports. If I actually come in here, if I have some cable or rod bracing, I can select those and say create from all. That gives me a quantity, and it gives me the fab and cut length if you'd like that. If you want something that's more kind of looks like a nice clean PDF report that you want to print out, you can run that here. So here I'm just creating an example of that. You can run bolt reports. You can also run like basically a shipper report for essentially making your shipper. So here this is showing, for instance, a cold form punch report. And if you have your DT punch set up for your punch codes, those can actually be output here. And then if I go, for instance, to xshipper.out, that allows us to actually create an example shipper. And this is the same kind of format that you can customize based on your sort of what you get out of MBS now, but you can also get that out of Tekla by customizing these reports. And then you can run that through the MBS Excel shipper macro that is inside of MBS itself to actually make the Excel spreadsheet if you need to. So bolt reports here, just as an example. So let's go ahead and scroll down to the 350 section, 350 bolt list. If I say create from all, that gives me a total count of all the bolts from the model. We can get an assembly bill of material list here, selecting that, say create from all, and it gives me basically what I would see in the bill of material on the drawings, but just in a report form. So there's a lot of different reports that you can kind of set up and customize. Some of these reports that are in the firm folder that we've provided to you are essentially here, starting up at the top with the plus symbol at the beginning so that we can easily get to them. But essentially you can create whatever outputs and reports that you need for fabrication. All right, so now what if I want to actually come up here and create an AGT export for my robotic welder? What I'll do is I'll come over to the Applications and Components panel at the right-hand side of Tekla. There's an AGT Robotics option here, and underneath that group, you'll see this AGT export. Now, if I double-click on that, it will launch the tool. Now, I'm going to go ahead and choose the From Selected option. You don't want to choose all because it'll just over-export all your cold form and additional things that you don't really necessarily need here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Document Manager underneath the Drawings and Reports in Tekla. That'll open up my drawing list or my Document Manager. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the drawings that I processed here and that I'm releasing for fab. So this is my assembly drawings list. I will just select all these drawings. I'll press this cube icon that says select objects in the model. And if I had any of my basically my rigid frame pieces or my end wall rafters and columns, anything that's pretty much going to be run on the robotic welder, I'll have all of those selected here. I'll choose the selected option. I can then press the or determine the name of the file if I want to, or just let it automatically generate that. And I will simply press OK. Now here I'm going to get a message that says, hey, you want to press save before you actually run this because it's going to convert all the welds of the selected objects to polygon welds. And that will cause a flag of numbering being out of date and then flag your drawings as being modified. So I'm going to follow that instruction. I'm going to save my model here at the upper left-hand corner. And what it's telling you to do is that after the export's run, reopen your model without saving. So I'm going to do that. I'll press yes to go ahead and run the export. There it's selecting all the objects and welds, converting them to polygon welds, and then it'll run the export here. It then creates this AGTX file inside of your model folder. There is some warnings that come in the log file. Most of the time it's just some small warnings about user attributes, which actually doesn't have any impact. So you just press OK, and it'll show you that the export is completed. Now, don't press the OK button. Basically, it tells you here, press the cancel button to close the dialog box. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to reopen the model here because we don't want that polygon weld thing to be saved and changed in our model. So I'll just reopen the model, and it says the model contains unsaved changes. We do not want to save because we saved before we ran the export. We don't want our drawings to be flagged, and we don't want the numbering to be out of date. So we'll reopen there, and we're all set. And then after the model opens here, I'll go to the Open Model folder. And then basically here, we're going to look for that AGTX file. So I can just do by date modified. And there we go, metal building training AGTX file. I can then send that to the robotic welder Cortex software and import all of those welded assemblies in there to review. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and create erection drawings. And to do that, I'll come up here to the Drawings and Reports menu at the top of Tekla. And I'm going to start by actually going to this Create GA Drawing icon. We'll see that we have a 3D view in the model, and I'm currently rotated in a nice isometric view of the model. I'll then go to this Drawing Properties button. This loads up the General Arrangement or Erection Drawing Properties dialog box. There are a series of saved away settings for different types of drawings that are prefixed with MBS. I'm going to load up MBS Isometric. I'll load these settings with the Load button. I will then come down and press Apply, so that way these loaded settings are applied for the next new drawing that I'm about to create. I'll apply and press OK, so it closes the dialog box. I'm going to check the Open Drawing button, or checkbox here, and after this is selected, when I press the Create button, not only will it create the drawing, but it'll actually open it up here for me to review. So here we have our title block, and we have a nice sheet, and if I want to scale that view up, because this building is fairly small, I can just double click on this gray view border. It'll open up the view properties, and we can change the scale down to maybe about half of that. So I'll just say 120, press modify, cancel, and now you can see that the view looks a little bit better for fitting on the sheet. Now I can right click and say, if I just click on the background of the drawing, okay, for some reason the Arrange Drawing Views isn't showing up there, but if I just select on the view and I just drag it with my mouse after I select it, it'll move the view to the location that I want. And there we go, we have our first drawing done, and I can just go ahead and close this down. I'm going to mark this drawing as ready for issuing because I've reviewed it and it looks good. I'll go then back to my document manager, and now we're creating general arrangement or erection drawings. So currently the list is showing assembly drawings. If I go to all drawings, that'll show me all of my drawings, including general arrangement, type G, and my assembly drawings that I previously created. If I just want to see erection drawings because that's all I'm working on, I'll just go to GA drawings over here on the left. Now I'm going to minimize this, and let's just go ahead and continue on with additional phases of our drawing creation. We'll now go into creating views. So if I go to my view menu at the top of Tekla, I'm going to go to New View, and I'm going to go to the Basic View command. This allows me to create a plan view. Now my job and my base view for the foundation is at 0, 0. So this is what I want for my coordinate. I'm then going to go up to the View Properties button here. So this tiny small View Properties button, that opens this up. And again, there are some saved away settings that you can use as a starting point. I'm going to use MBS Anchorable Plan. I will press the Load button. It'll fill in some settings. I will press Apply because I want these settings to be applied that I just loaded for the next new view that I create in the model. So I'll apply, OK. I'll then say that I want my view created at 0 and press the Create button. Now I have a view that is created at 0, 0. If I rotate around, notice that I'm not seeing the full height of the building. I'm only seeing the base of the columns at 0, 0 because that's where I created this view at. Now, if I double click on the background, the reason why I'm not seeing the full height of the building is because the view plane was created at 0, and I'm only seeing a view depth up of 3 feet and a view depth down of 3 feet. Now I'm going to do Control P, so that way I go back and do a plane view. I have my view created here. I'll close the view down. I will then go back to Drawings and Reports. I will go into the Create GA drawing. I will then select the Anchorable Plan view. I'll go to Drawing Properties button here. I'll go to my drop-down settings and I will load up Anchor Bolt Plan. I'll press Load. Notice that these settings in the drawing title appear. I'll apply these settings because these are the loaded settings that I want to apply before I create my next drawing. I'll then select on that open drawing button, press create, and now I have my anchor bolt plan created here. Now this isn't enough. We actually need some scaled up views and basically detail callouts. So this is where I'm going to come over to the right hand side of Tekla, and I'm going to choose the Applications and Components option. I will then go to MBS Tools, and you're going to see that there are different dimensioning and cleanup tools that you'll use for each different style of drawing that you do. I'm going to do the anchor bolt plan tool. Now here I can come in and I can set the scale of my blow up views. I can then also set the scale of my basically detail views that are going to be created over here. I'll press the apply button. It'll read through the drawing, add some additional dimensions, draw my scaled up blow up views for all of my columns. And then once it's all done, it'll also create a new sheet here of additional details that have like kind of basically my blow ups at a scale, show the edge of the building, shows my dimensions of my base plate into my anchor bolts. And now I have my anchor bolt plan done. I will close this. I will mark this as ready for issuing. I'll then go back to my document manager, and both my anchor bolt plan and this sections and detail sheet are ready. So I'll just mark those. And then you can continue to progress and do this throughout the rest of your job. Now, let's go ahead and do a plan drawing. So again, we'll just repeat by going to View. I'll go to View Properties. I will load up some settings here in the bottom called MBS Roof Plan. I will load that up. Now here, Roof Plan is actually going to look up 50 feet, so I have the full height of the building, and then down maybe 3 feet. And I can go ahead and press Apply and OK. And I have one of two options. If I create a basic view, a plan view, some people will actually create the plan view at the top of the eave, which is the height of the building, or they may create it from 0, 0 to keep things simple and just show the full height of the building, but then they'll filter out things that are not that on the roof. So we're just going to go ahead and say keep it at 0, say create. There's our plan view. It says roof framing plan. Go to Drawings and Reports, create GA drawing. Now there's a roof framing plan view. We'll go to Drawing Properties button, load up MBS, roof framing plan, load, see how basically the settings change, apply these settings for the next new drawing we're going to create and press OK. Check the open drawing checkbox, say create. Now we have a roof plan, basically shows us, it looks like we have a bunch of AL1 loose clips in here. And again, if you would have created this at the higher height, you might not have seen all those loose clips that are in there from basically at the lower levels on the girts. You have your member table essentially here. And if we want to clean this up, let's first maybe change the scale again, double click on the view border, change this to 110, modify, cancel. And here we can see that if we click on the gray border, we can just move this around. And now that looks a little bit better. Again, you'll come over to the tools on the right-hand corner here, and you're going to look for the roof framing plan tool. You'll double click on that, and then you can basically set your filters of your different types of part names in the model. Press apply, and it'll go through, automatically dimension. It'll also show the purlin laps and kind of offset those, which looks closer to like how an MBS drawing looks. And there you go. You have everything set. You close this down, mark the drawing as ready for issuing, save, and you are all set. We'll close down the roof framing plan. Now we'll do one last drawing here just to show how an elevation view works. And what I'll do for that is I'll actually go to View Properties here. So I'll go up to the top of Tekla, go to View. I will go to View Properties. I'm going to load up basically a MBS end wall. We'll load those settings. This is end wall number 1, so grid line 1. I'll apply those settings. And these applied settings will then be used when I create the next new view. Instead of basic view this time, we're going to create a view with 2 points. When I use the view with 2 points command, basically I'm going to pick here along grid line 1, and notice that the order in which I pick my 2 points from left to right or right to left will determine the direction that the view is being created. Well, I want this view to be looking from the outside in, so I'm going to go from left to right here. Now I've got my view created. I can right click and interrupt to escape out of that command. And next, I will then go to Drawings and Reports, create GA drawing. I will select my end wall view, go to Drawing Properties. At the top, I'm going to choose the MBS end wall. Okay, I can go ahead and load. I'll just go ahead and say end wall 1 here. I'll apply these settings again at the bottom, so that way these settings that I loaded are applied for the next new drawing that I create. I will check this open drawing, create, and here we have a new drawing created. Now you'll see that the member table, if we have 3 plate rafters and columns, that will appear. based on the information coming across from MBS. We have our bolt table, and then we also have a member table over here on the right with additional bolt table. Now, we can see all of our loose clips here, so you might have to do a little bit of cleanup. This is a very bolted job here for our cold form. And then we can also change the scale, again, if we need to. I'll come in here and maybe we'll just change this to like, say 96, modify, just to get a little bit more size here to fit on the sheet. Then what I'll do is you can use either the rigid frame or the end wall elevation. I will tell you that even though we're on an end wall, I might use the rigid frame because I might get more dimensions here for flange braces and things like that. So I'll just say apply. So there we go. All of our dimensions have been applied there. And then we have our drawing all cleaned up. We can go ahead and close this down, mark ready for issuing. Okay, so now that we have all of our erection drawings created, we'll go back to Drawings and Reports at the top of Tekla, Document Manager here at the upper left, and then we'll select all of our general arrangement drawings. I'll then right-click on the drawings and choose the User-Defined Attributes option. I'll go to the Workflow tab, we'll uncheck all the checkboxes, and then I'll fill in my initials here. We'll set the check by, and then also the date. Only the checkboxes that are checked are going to be affected during the modify. Everything else that's unchecked will be ignored. I'll press modify, cancel, and now we have the drawn by information set for the title block. Now, I'm going to come down to the revision button here at the lower left. I'll press that, and I can load some saved settings here for field use just to fill in a few things. I'll go ahead and type in my initials. We'll go ahead and say the check by, and then we can set the dates. And then when I press the Create button, you'll see that those revisions are now added. Now, we have the drawing selected. We'll then go ahead and right-click and choose the Print option. When I choose that, I can go ahead and come up here to the upper left-hand corner, and I can choose the PDF Print. Now, I'll go ahead and press the click here to preview in the middle, and I don't want color, so I'm going to just go ahead and use black and white. And we can see that here 24 by 36 doesn't work because I actually have 11 by 17. So let me go back to that. So I'll go to 11 by 17. I'll switch this to black and white. And there we go. Now we can see that everything fits. So you can change the sheet sizes, and you can also change the scale. If you do want to print to larger sheets or smaller sheets, you can adjust that as required and change the scaling or auto fit. Now, I'm going to come up here to open the folder when finished. I'm going to make individual PDF files. Again, I could also make a single PDF binder if I want to, but I want individual sheets. I'll go down to the lower left-hand corner and press print, and then all my erection drawings will be printed, and now I have both my erection drawings as well as all of my assembly drawings that we've created. That gives you a good overview of how to create all of the deliverables from importing from MBS through SlideRule into Tekla, numbering your model, fixing things up, and then creating shop drawings, erection drawings, exporting your CNC information, and we will finish up with actually publishing the model for Trimble Connect. Now, the first thing you can do is you can actually come up to the Tekla menu at the upper left-hand corner and go to Export, and then there's an IFC option, and you can also export a 3D DWG if you'd prefer. Now, IFC files actually have property data like the piece mark and profile and information can be published from Tekla, so we'll choose that option. Now, there's a variety of different save settings up here at the top. Let's say that we just want to export an IFC file, say for Navisworks or Trimble Connect or whatever software that you're using to view 3D BIM models using the IFC format. I'll just load this up, and we can put the name of the file here if we'd like. We can choose all objects or selected objects, and we can choose which type of information that we want to include. So we want bolts, welds, assemblies, and parts, even the grid information. Now what we can do is we can just go ahead and say export, and then a standalone IFC file will be created in our IFC subfolder inside the model folder. So once that's done, we'll close this, we'll go to Tekla menu, open model folder, and then here if we sort by name, there's a subfolder in the model folder here that's called IFC, and there is our IFC file. Now you can either do IFC zip, which just compresses it a little bit more, or make the standalone IFC file, depending on what your software can actually view. Now, I could double click on this and actually just open this up with Trimble Connect right here on my desktop if I have Trimble Connect for Windows installed. Or what I can also do is rather than exporting the IFC to a standalone file, I can come up here to the Trimble Connect menu at the top of Tekla and then we can actually link to the Trimble Connect project and publish the model directly there. Now, at the beginning of the video, I did not automatically create the Trimble Connect project or link to an existing project. So when I come over here to Trimble Connect tab, I'm going to go to Upload Models. And this is where it's actually going to prompt me to go ahead and do that linking here. So if at the beginning of the job I would have had the, start Trimble Connect collaboration, this is the dialog box that would have came up. Now here I can enter, either select an existing job that I already have, or I can just type in a new project to be created. I'm going to store this in North America, and it's underneath my account. I'll just go ahead and say create. It'll create that Trimble Connect job, and then I can go ahead and upload the model. All right, so to do that, I'll come up here to the Upload Model button. It'll ask me to save the changes and to the model and then upload, so I'll do so. And then here, it'll basically go through at the lower left-hand corner and tell me whether the model's been exported. It's starting the upload. It says uploading the model has been complete, so I'll just say close. And then what I can do from there is I'll actually just go up to the For Browser option here. That will then load up Trimble Connect. It'll actually log me into the web interface. I then see that model has been loaded up, and then I can just choose this option here. Now, on the web interface, it might take a little bit for it to actually convert the model so that we can view it on the web. But once that's complete, our model will be loaded here. And now the rest of your project team, whether it's project managers, your customers, can essentially log in and view this model that you've published. They can actually make red lines, make comments, even to-dos, and collaborate around the model without having to have Tekla Structures installed on their computers. Here we go. Now we have the model actually loaded up, and if I just double click on a part, we can basically come in here and we can see information about that part, such as the piece mark and additional data. Again, we can make red lines and even make to-dos and review this information and collaborate on the model. So here you go. This gives you a great overview all the way starting from MBS, bringing the model into Tekla Structures using SlideRule, how to create shop drawings, erection drawings, all of your data exports, and then even collaborating with the model beyond Tekla Structures.
For additional training and setup and configuration of MBS SlideRule with Tekla Structures, please reach out to me at my contact information shown, and I'd be glad to help.